Welcome to the Visionary Chronicles, a business strategy podcast where we provide insight to those looking for creative, executable strategies built around the latest disruptive ideas, innovative cultures, product creators, and marketing solutions. Welcome to the Visionary Chronicles podcast. Appreciate your time again today, and we'd like to go back to a series we've been talking with a few weeks back in regards to true visionaries, true industry visionaries that have changed a market, changed a category that we now enjoy or continue to enjoy today. Previously, we had talked about John D. Rockefeller. We had talked about Andrew Carnegie. And today I'd like to talk about the innovator, the icon of the auto industry, Henry Ford. It's interesting as I start talking about these visionaries and the evolution of these categories, what they were before these visionaries were able to not only create, but continue to reinvent their industry, where it has evolved today, where we continue to use the products that they brought to market. And this is certainly the case with Henry Ford. He is called the People's Tycoon. That's a book that I recently read, and along with books from Andrew Carnegie as well as John D. Rockefeller, great books, and ones that really give you a complete background on what transpired not only over the evolution of them building these iconic categories and products that we use today, but also the trials and tribulations that they went through. For me, it's more interesting to see the life they had and how they evolved from where they were coming from to get to where they are at. In regards to these categories, how did they come up with the invention of steel, the invention of oil, and in this case with Henry Ford, the automotive industry? He's absolutely the one that is considered the icon of the auto industry, and he was actually a beneficiary of both Rockefeller Oil and Carnegie Steel. So how did Henry Ford evolve to being the icon of the auto industry, similar to what Carnegie and Rockefeller had developed? And the first thing that Henry Ford did was he, as many people do, whether it be Steve Jobs or Elon Musk or any true visionary, they go through a lot of trials and tribulations. And in this instance, what's interesting with Henry Ford is he had actually aligned with Thomas Edison. And while at Edison's company, the first product Henry Ford had actually come up with was called the Quadracycle. And coming off the Quadracycle, he had actually left Thomas Edison's company and saw an opportunity to form a new automotive company. In this case, was not Ford Motor Company, but it was called Detroit Auto Company. And he formed Detroit Auto Company in order to build and create high-end automotive products. And turns out the failure of Detroit Auto Company was because of the inferior construction of the product. So it was quite interesting from the very beginning. Ford's mindset was to create superior products, but in this instance, that wasn't the case. And the company actually failed, which I found quite interesting because you don't hear about that a lot. And most in every instance I see is that there's always failure before success. And in this case with Ford and forming the Detroit Auto Company, the objective that he had and the eventual reality of the product didn't mesh. And so it actually failed. And so what he did is he formed another company. In this case was Ford Motor Company. And the interesting thing is, one of the lead investors back in the day with Ford Motor Company was the Dodge brothers. They had actually provided the capital, the formation of the company, and the prior Detroit Auto Company turned into Cadillac Auto Company. So it's kind of an interesting evolution to take a step back to look beyond how Henry Ford actually was successful in building the automotive industry, but what were the steps to get there? So being the beneficiary of Carnegie and Rockefeller, founding the Ford Motor Company in conjunction with the Dodge brothers, the first thing that he looked at was really what do we want to create? And what is the mode of transportation that we want to put in the hands of everyday people? And the first product that they came up with was the Model T. And this is a product that, interestingly enough, when you look at the statistics behind this product, yes, it was the first true value automotive product in the market. It was selling back in the day. In 1908, it was released for $825, which is the equivalent of about $23,000 today. And Ford had this idea of, if it's going to be mass produced, what does it matter as far as the options? And one of those, interestingly enough, was color. So you look out on the road today, and even today I'll have to say that most cars, when you look, are black, white, gray. The variations in color are very limited. And Ford is famous for having said you can have any color you want as long as it's black. And so that was kind of an interesting dichotomy to what we see today. But at the end of the day, this is the product versus the options. It was a mode or a new mode of transportation that he knew was needed in the marketplace. So he was willing to realize that. And he had gone through a lot of trials with people that didn't believe in the product, didn't believe in the category. And so he really had to overcome a lot of objections, as most people do in developing a new category. Have the vision of what you want to create and stick to that. And another famous saying that Ford had, which carries through today as well, is think you can, think you can't. Either way, you're right. I thought that's such a great saying that holds so true today as well. In people's mindset of not creating a category, but growing your category. There's a lot of people that are willing to take risks, that are successful and embrace failure. Others that don't. Henry Ford, in coming up with this think you can, think you can't analogy, really came out of this flathead V8 engine that eventually came out in 1926. But prior to 1926, the pure power of having invented a new category and a mode of transportation is mind-boggling. Throughout the process in 1914, he actually created the assembly line, which reduced costs from $825 down to a little over $320. So a significant reduction in cost as a result of the assembly lines. Prior to Ford, everything that was assembled was static. So he had the idea of having modules that move along an assembly line where people are responsible for a specific part of the vehicle. And by design, it significantly decreased the cost of the vehicles. So as you look at these great visionaries, it's one thing to invent a category, but it's another thing to reinvent what you've invented. In this case, Henry Ford had built the automotive industry, had started a new category, and continued to evolve it as he grew. So when you look at the sheer volume in this day and age, the amount of vehicles that are sold in the industry, back in 1913, he released the Model T in 1908. Just to give you a perspective, 1913, he invented the assembly line. And over that period, not only reducing costs by over 60 to 70%, he was able to gain a 50% share in the market with color black. The only other color that was offered over that period was red. And predominantly, everything was black. And over that period, he sold 15 million vehicles, which is a statistic that stood for over 45 years. And the evolution of the Model T was eventually them inventing the V8 vehicle, the flathead V8 as we know it today. The 1926, they finally came out with the Model A, which had the flathead V8. And this is going back to where, again, Henry Ford had mentioned, think you can, think you can't. Reading the story of how the evolution of the V8 happened is the engineers said it's impossible. You just can't do it. So what he took is he flipped that on its head and said, think you can, think you can't. Either way, you're right. So what Henry Ford's mindset was, he wasn't a trained engineer. He wasn't somebody that knew how to build a V8. He was just an inspiration that aspired people to greatness. And that's what great leaders do in their respective industries, is people that are challenged with a common vision realize success. And that's what you see with Henry Ford in the V8, eventually turning into the Model A. And many of the other things that Henry Ford, which are interesting even today, that he was a visionary on, was he was the first to increase the wage to $5 a day, which was unheard of back in the day. In 1914, the middle of a recession, he actually doubled the average wage on a daily basis back in 1914. And he was also the one that put together the 40-hour work week, saying that people need to rest on the weekend and they can't be working 10, 12 hours a day. So the efficiency factor was what Henry Ford leaned on. So he knew on his assembly line that the efficiency of people during a day is 8 to 10 hours a day. So he was one of the visionaries, or the visionary, not only on many different levels within an industry, but that vision is now applied across almost every industry, whether it be fair wages, an average work week, understanding the efficiency and the improvements in production as a result of what you realized. So when you look at Ford's evolution from having failed on his first company, Detroit Auto, to then partnering with the Dodge brothers to build Ford, having the legacy of Detroit move over to Cadillac, it's an interesting evolution of the automotive industry and how all these pieces came together over a time frame. And Ford, to his credit, built not only the assembly line, but also fairness in wages and work weeks. So when you look at visionaries in these industries, you look for things that they do and provide value beyond product. And this is clearly the case with Henry Ford. Yes, he had a great product that was adopted by 15 million people over a less than 15-year time frame. And he evolved what he had built, putting together something that most said was impossible. Going from the Model T to the Model A to a V8 that we currently use today, and people and engineers telling him it's impossible. But he didn't relent. And even to this day, there's so many stories that we talk about with those visionaries that challenge teams. But if you have a common vision defined by a leader that sticks to what he wants to achieve in order to realize success, this is what you get from people like Henry Ford, from Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, all the successful visionaries and leaders of our industries. And there's many more that have built these great products. But what you find is the visionaries are just not on a singular one-hit wonder product. What I want to get across here is that Ford, like many others, visionaries, is they created an industry, but then adapted within that industry to make something even better, or to help other industries build their product more efficient or better. In this case, the assembly line. In this case, the work week. In this case, fair wages. So whatever you look at with Henry Ford, yes, Ford Motor Company is his legacy. He's the icon of the automotive industry, yes. But he was also a visionary in many ways, even outside of the industry. So having that statistic with the Model T built in 1908, building the assembly line, reducing costs by 60 to 70%, selling over 15 million units, grabbing a 50% market share, it's unheard of today. But what a great inspirational story for people to adopt as they move forward in their companies. Is even if a category has been established, like the automotive industry. Look at all the evolution over the years of what has happened. And now with electric vehicles. So as you move in your category, there's always an opportunity to evolve, to incrementally improve what you're doing. And I don't care if it's in apparel, footwear, automotive industry, whatever your specialty, understand there's always room for improvement. I think we all know that. But what the interesting thing is, even with the Carnegies and Rockefellers and the Visionaries and the Fords of the world, they evolve over time. And they provide value beyond the product that they created. So Henry Ford, on his legacy, having passed away in 1947, his legacy to this day in the automotive industry, the visionary, the one that built the automotive transportation as we know it today, the pioneer, his legacy carries on outside of the automotive industry. And what's great with Henry Ford and with these other visionaries is we get to look back on what was their mindset prior to creating or inventing this category. Being able to see words on paper that allow us to embrace an opportunity and a legacy within our generation. So what a great opportunity it is for us to look back on these visionaries, see the impact that they had, and also how it adapts to what you're doing on a day-to-day basis and what you may be able to do better as well. Not all of us are going to be able to invent a category. That's 1 in a million. But what we can do is we can embrace what they created, continue on with their legacy, and provide a better product, provide a better service, and as a result, successfully integrating our brand or our company into the future of your respective product category. Would like to thank you for listening to the Visionary Chronicles today. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully you've enjoyed the subjects that we talk about each week here on the Visionary Chronicles, and we feel it's very important. We understand that there's professional needs and support you need with your companies and with your brands, but we also appreciate the fact that you've got some personal needs. As leaders of companies and brands, there are many things that you have to deal with, and we want to make sure that we're addressing those as well. If you like what you hear, we would really appreciate subscribing to the Visionary Chronicles. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, and Podbean. So we would really appreciate if you'd subscribe and look forward to bringing additional episodes to you each week. So again, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Look forward to the next podcast.